So Bernard, we've been talking about the different foundations, 12 of them, and different categories. We've spoken about the person of God, the purpose of God, the patterns of God, and we put the last three into a category called the people of God. Just tell us about these three.
Well, to be honest, I have to start off with a confession. And the confession is that the first 9 were obvious to me. I guess the way I am wired is to be passionate about God and His honour and His glory and the way He is. And it took a while before God started arresting me and saying, well, what's the purpose of all this? You know, for God so loved the world. It was supposed to have an effect on us. And there were some foundational issues about the effect of, you know, the person, purpose, the pattern of God. It's not just there as a theory. It's meant to affect us as people. Amazing as that seems, God not only loves the world, He loves each of us, and so there were keys there that we had to look at. And the first one we're going to be looking at, I'll call it kingdom first to last, is what He set up for us was not only that we seek Him first, but also that the context in which we live is meant to be a kingdom context. The second is therefore looking at who we are. That not only affects us in terms of our personhood, but it does affect the way we approach people. I know the people have often been accused of being quite callous in their way of looking at people. So we want to look at that. Why is that? Is there a root to that? What is the right root we should have that causes us to have the same attitude as God, where He loves people, He takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked. And which leads us to finally His glorious gospel and the true nature of that gospel, and how it reveals Him and how it affects us. And so those will be the things we'll be looking at in this final section.
So tell us about the first one.
Kingdom first to last. I know we've looked at this before under one of the other headings, but Jesus came. The message of the kingdom was first, the demonstration of the kingdom was first, and everything else was fruit from there. Then Jesus said, seek first the kingdom and everything else will be added to you. And certainly with my time, and I guess your time amongst God's people, you know that actually the thing that often takes precedence over the kingdom, and I know we could shoot arrows at a lot of things here, is actually church patterns, church government, church ways of doing things, our systems and everything else. And basically this is what's being said here. Now if we seek first the kingdom, in other words, we seek the face of the King, we're transformed. We seek the cause of the King, then His will gets done. And the fruit of that is a people who love God, love one another, and actually reach out to lost people and bring salt and light into all directions. In other words, Jesus is able to build His church. And so we must seek first the kingdom. Jesus, when He was speaking to the apostles and asked them, who do you think I am? You know, there's very famous verses where Peter says, you know, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said, flesh and blood has not revealed that to you, but my Father in heaven. And He goes on to say, I will build my church, but I'll give you the keys of the kingdom. I think for generations we keep swapping the roles around. Is we want to build the church our way, our design. How do we build bigger churches, better churches? And then when it comes to the kingdom, the sin we see around us, the mess our countries are in, all these sorts of things, we say, God, why won't you visit us? Well, He told us why. He said, actually, I've given you the keys. You're meant to transform your environment. The Old Testament puts it this way, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, you know, and seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, then I will heal their land. The same sort of thing as in the New Testament. If you seek my kingdom, actually everything else you're looking for, I can bring. And so that's what it means by kingdom first to last. As we seek the King, all the other stuff comes into place. And one of the tragedies that I've observed is actually it's very difficult for the King to interrupt our church schedules and our Christian ways of doing things. You know, so often I have people tell me they can't do something which actually they know God's told them to do because actually they've got a meeting to attend, or this sort of thing. That doesn't make any sense. And worst of all, time and time again, I see congregations of God's people who actually in the very makeup of their religious life are actually led away from obeying the king and led to a passive sitting there just responding to what's being said from the front, as if the whole process was an education rather than a transformation. In other words, it's back to eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil rather than from walking with the life of God. And the other thing, I'll try and be brief about this, but I was gripped once with Jesus teaching on the kingdom, and he told the power of the wheat and the tares. And this is what I mean by context there. It said, the angels said, shall we separate them? And Jesus said, don't separate them. And I think, well, it comes to about 2 millennia now of trying to separate out believers from non-believers. And so we do that on the basis of belief. You're either in or you're out. But the trouble is with that system, it's not only not what God told us to do, but on that basis, the devil's in amongst the people of God, because he's a believer. He doesn't follow God, but he's a believer. And the context here was, no, we weren't supposed to see whether people are in or out by what they believed, i.e. just a correct creedal statement. We were supposed to see whether people were God's people by did they bear fruit. By their fruit you shall know them. Did they manifest the marks of Christ? That was one way. And secondly, did they obey the shepherd's voice? Well, again, if you were to go through the Christian groups that you know, this is the question. Who is obeying the shepherd's voice? Those are the sheep. The ones that don't obey the shepherd are the goats. And my observation has been the four walls of a building of any sort, whether it be a house or an auditorium or a cathedral, do not tell you who's obeying the shepherd's voice and who is not. And so the wheat and the tares grow everywhere. And actually, the kingdom context is looking for those who respond to the shepherd by bearing his likeness, fruit, and by obeying his voice, which is good sheep. That's what we're looking for. So the message we need to make sure we preach is that we may need, above everything else, we need to make sure that we're clearly giving the shepherd's voice.
So let's be clear about this, Bernard. Are you suggesting that the kingdom exists both inside and outside the walls of church?
Not only am I saying that, sometimes I think it's stronger, exists more outside the walls of church than it does inside. You and I both know this. We know individuals that we have spoken to, that you speak to them, what you know is God's word, and they're in a Christian meeting context and they can't receive it. And then you find them at their place of work and you say exactly the same thing, and the lights come on, they come alive, they can hear it. Sometimes I believe the structures that are around us actually hinder us from, as I said, from obeying the king. And it's not always true, but often that is true. And so the key issue here, I repeat it again, is that people obey the voice of the king. And obviously the king's purpose is to fill the earth and subdue it. So his kingdom is increasing in every sphere of life. And what did Jesus find? The truth is, if we're really honest, Jesus found that the kingdom was received and grew in people's homes, lives, families, in the marketplace. When he came into religious settings, he generally found that's where the kingdom found its greatest opposition. And I think we will find that too. And that's not because we're against institutional church, it's just that we don't want people to be deceived here. Are we obeying the king? Simply put.
Right.